Experience the epic series that the world is watching and raving about. Catch up or relive the first 3 seasons of Game of Thrones, now on HBO On Demand, and watch back-to-back episodes anytime on your schedule. This year, join the Legion of Followers and enjoy past seasons of Game of Thrones, plus the premiere of Season 4 on April 6th on HBO. Don't miss out. Sign up for HBO and get free access to HBO On Demand.
A prominent religious leader likens the government's actions to a democratic dictatorship. This as the Christian Council president speaks out on the Randy Frazier church controversy. Heavily armed police officers block off South Street, plus the national insurance minister tight-lipped on the cost of NHI consultants. We've got those stories and a whole lot more tonight. I'm Bonnie Toot, and MB12 starts now. Topping news tonight, Bahamas Faith Ministries International President Dr. Myles Munroe has likened the Christie administration's handling of last year's failed gambling referendum to a democratic dictatorship. He's not happy with government's plan to regulate and tax web shops, insisting he'd prefer it if government introduced a national lottery. Jasmine Bonamy has his candid comments in this report.
Dr. Munroe says while he does not support gambling, he would prefer the government set up a national lottery instead of regularizing the web shop industry to protect the state of democracy in the country. Munroe expressed concern that by legalizing web shop gaming, a small group of owners in an industry which is estimated to generate $400 million per year has the ability to influence who gets elected. He added that he believed the government must consider whether regularizing a small number of web shops poses the risk of creating a corrupt system.
A national lottery would protect against that. And in my presentation, I said, look, I would rather the government consider a national lottery for the government to control it. The government control the revenue. They control the dispensing of that revenue so that it becomes the people's property. I believe now, I don't believe in gambling in any form. But if you're going to go in that direction, you don't give that power to a small group of people, because we will never have a safe government again. Matter of fact, I think that any small group in a country that controls so much power that they can influence who gets elected, they will become a shadow government. We will therefore have a corrupt system that will never be corrected. I am concerned about the government allowing a small group of people to have that kind of power to control that amount of money. Because if in a small country of 350,000 people, we got a small group of people who could control over $500 million or more, they could buy a government.
The internationally recognized religious leader also had this message for lawmakers.
And I hope that every politician would think about that. It's not just about taxing money or anything. It's about, are you selling the system of safety of democracy to a small group of people?
On January 28, 2013, the majority of voters who participated in the gambling referendum voted against the regularization and taxation of web shops and the establishment of a national lottery. Prime Minister Perry Christie admitted in January that he regrets holding the referendum. He said he should have regulated the web shop industry upon coming to office. In March, Minister of Tourism Obi Wilshcombe, who has responsibility for gaming, said he would push for web shops to be regulated by July 1st. Wilshcombe has said a national lottery is not on the government's radar, as it remains focused on regularizing web shops, but the issue is not off the table. Munroe said the government's move to regulate and tax web shops, despite the no vote expressed by the majority of Bahamians who voted on January 28th, has bred distrust among the voting public.
We are really discussing an issue now of a government ignoring what it promised the people to proceed with an intention that they are bent on doing. And if they do that, my concern is they may lose credibility forever. In other words, no matter how many years pass, they will be remembered as the government who ignored what they asked the people to vote on, and their trust account will be depleted. That's my concern. The minute you lose people's trust, your leadership is going to become defective. If people cannot trust you, they will not follow you. If they cannot trust you, they won't believe what you say. So I always tell people that the currency of leadership is trust. A leader is only as strong as the trust the people have in him or her. If you lose the trust of people, you're no longer a leader, you are a dictator. If you cannot inspire people, you have to manipulate them. The minute you manipulate people, you are no longer a leader, you are a dictator. So true leaders do not force their will on people. They actually sell their will to people. The people agree to the will that they sold, and then they support that will. If you force your will on people, you're no longer a leader. You are a dictator. And there is a possibility to have a democratic dictator, because you can ask people for their ideas and ignore the ideas.
Meantime, Munroe insisted that the questions posed in the gambling referendum were defective. Reporting for NB12, I'm Jasmine Bonamy.
Meantime, newly re-elected Bahamas Christian Council President Dr. Ranford Patterson is speaking out on another controversial issue, asserting that politicians cannot legislate what happens within churches. However, he says if legislation is put in place to protect children from convicted sex offenders, he would be one of the first people to support it. Christina McNeil explains.
He's remained relatively quiet since convicted sex offender Earl Randy Frazier has opened his new church. But now the president of the Bahamas Christian Council is speaking up on what should and should not happen within church walls. But until laws are put in place, Patterson says there's virtually nothing anyone can do about it.
We are at a thin line between where we need to go and where we are. I agree that there are some things that's happening in our churches today that should never happen. But if people choose to follow an individual, there's absolutely nothing any of us can do about it. The only thing is, as it relates to being able to perform weddings and other things that requires the state's involvement, then the government can help by regulating. The question for me is, because there's no regulation, the government has to take some responsibility. If there is sexual impropriety as relates to children, and there's no law that's governing it, then what are they complaining about? We need to put laws in place that will deal with persons who offend children.
Minister of State for National Security Keith Bell recently asserted that the government should consider regulating who can lead religious institutions. However, Patterson says the challenge with that is it may infringe upon freedom of religion. Rather, he says he would support laws to protect children from convicted sex offenders and the creation of an independent body to regulate churches.
We have freedom of religion in the Bahamas, and that is something that most people at this point, because of what has happened or what is happening, would cry and say, look, we need to regulate. But when we do regulations, then they're going to cry and say, stay out of our business. Most definitely. I definitely believe that anyone who offends children ought not to have any dealings with children. But there's no law.
However, he notes that you cannot force a church to come under an umbrella where it is regulated.
I wish there was a way we could regulate the churches. I'd be the first to sign on, but I don't know if there's any way we can do it.
Several other pastors, including Bishop Simeon Hall, have also expressed support for the creation of an independent body made up of religious leaders, including representatives from the Bahamas Christian Council to regulate churches. Reporting for NB12, I'm Christina McNeil.
And from the courts, heavily armed police officers blocked off South Street and guarded the magistrate's court complex this afternoon, minutes before a young man was charged in connection with one of the country's first murders for 2014. Darren Neely, seen here in the black t-shirt, was charged with the January 1st murder of Jason Clark and the attempted murder of Michael Preval. According to police reports, two men were sitting in front of an apartment complex on Buttonwood Avenue, Pinewood Gardens after 7 p.m. back in January when someone drove up and shot them. One of the men died on the scene, the other was treated in hospital. Rashad LaRota, seen here in the blue and black striped shirt, was also charged with the attempted murder of Michael Praval. However, police say that incident reportedly happened on April 17th. Both Neely and LaRota were charged with firearm possession with the intent to endanger life. According to the court docket, the two men intended to endanger the life of Edward Butler with a handgun. They were not required to enter a plea to any of those charges. Magistrate Subu Swain informed Neely and LaRota that their matters would be fast-tracked to the Supreme Court and transferred to Court Number 9 for service of a voluntary bill of indictment. The matter has been adjourned to May 19th. Minister of Labor and National Insurance Shane Gibson remaining tight-lipped today on the progress Costa Rican consultants have made on pricing national health insurance. Speaking to reporters outside Cabinet this morning, Gibson says he will release information regarding the costing exercise being conducted by Sanagest International at an appropriate time. However, he would not provide a date. This comes after Free National Movement Deputy Chairman Dr. Dwayne Sands said he doubts NHI will be implemented by the January 2016 target date set by the Christie administration.
It is really difficult for me to keep responding to an always rejected man who wants to be a politician. Right? He is at his best when he's criticized, and I'm not going to endorse him or authenticate what he says by responding to it. As soon as he's able to be elected in Parliament and the people say that we want you, then I will speak to him.
Gibson says the goal is to provide every Bahamian with affordable access to health care through universal coverage. He says more details will be released shortly.
We're not operating in a vacuum. As soon as we have all the information and we are ready to release the information, we will release it. It makes no sense to me personally to release information bits and pieces at a time. And so as soon as we are ready to release the appropriate information through the appropriate means, then we will do so. But at this time, we're not going to be releasing information as the committee meets every single day. We won't do that. I would speak to that at the proper time. I couldn't tell you what is going to be introduced, when it's going to be introduced, because the committee is now working. As soon as we're able to give you some time frame as to when anything will be introduced, our goal is to introduce it in January 2016. As soon as we're able to speak to releasing it prior to that, we will do so. But I can't. I don't have to speculate, because we are working on it, and as soon as we're ready to, we will.
NHI was previously estimated to cost $235 million annually. The People's Republic of China has donated over $570,000 worth of new state-of-the-art equipment to Princess Margaret Hospital. The equipment and medical supplies were used during Bright Journey, a 12-day program in which 8 Chinese doctors and nurses performed cataract surgery on 101 patients at PMH. An official handover ceremony was held today at the multi-million-dollar critical care block, which is not yet open. Health Minister Dr. Perry Gomez says Bright Journey is an innovative project which he hopes will create a template for further collaboration between the Bahamas and China.
The generosity of our Chinese partners, as you just heard, is not limited to the provision of surgical expertise. All of the instruments, equipment, lenses, and other supplies that were transported and brought to the Bahamas by the Chinese team will now be for permanent use in the Princess Margaret Hospital. This represents a donation to the hospital of over $570,000.
Bahamian Dexter Nemore was among the 101 patients who had their cataracts removed free of charge. The 50-year-old says before the surgery, doctors told him he had the vision of a 90-year-old.
I've lost almost all of my sight, all of my vision in my right eye. And they worked. It was a wonderful job that they did, and I received 20/20 vision. I hope that God will bless all of the nurses and doctors, and I'll always be praying for you. And thanks again.
Professor Yang Lu of the Bright Journey team and Chinese Ambassador His Excellency Yang Geshang said the team is from one of China's premier hospitals.
We are one of the toppest hospitals in China, so our team represents the country. So we want to show a friendship. We carry all the Chinese people's friendship to here, to Bahama people.
是中国政府 和巴哈马政府密切合作的结晶。
This is the success of this bread journey is the fruition through the cooperation of both Chinese and Bahamian governments.
The Chinese medical team arrived in the Bahamas on April 30th and will leave tomorrow. When MB12 returns, the Financial Services Minister says he empathizes with businesses over VAT uncertainty. Plus, the Social Services Minister calls rape statistics alarming. So stay with us.